Okay, we have a full house today. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Let's talk about AI in action and the real world use cases in financial services of tomorrow. So just to get a little overview of how you, our industry leaders here, are using AI in their operations at the moment, could you guys help us provide some insights on what percentage of AI is integrated into your operations at the moment, and what's your perceived goal of the future? Maybe we can start with you, Sean.
Thank you. Here at PayPal, we've been using and investing in AI for nearly 10 years across a number of areas, whether it's security, fraud, and risk, AI personalization, and also product engineering, software development lifecycle efforts. And so over the past couple of years, as we look to leverage generative AI to accelerate that, those are the key investments we're driving right now into the future.
Yeah, look, very, very similar story for Mastercard. We've been working with AI in the backbone of our network for more than a decade, really using us to drive the anomaly detection on the fraud side, right? So all of the 150 billion transactions that we process a year, we're running AI on every one of those transactions. And so obviously we've now moved into the personalization space with dynamic yield, and then we'll be looking in the natural operational efficiency piece first, and then looking as to how can we expand further into, I guess, Copilot and other applications as we go forward.
Annette?
Yeah, a little bit a different story for insurance. We are coming out of a more, I would say, manual world. We are moving from experimentation in scalability and implementing AI, especially in operations. I think we have already a lot implemented if it comes to our call and service center, the chatbots. But now we are focusing more from an end-to-end perspective, how to enable sales, the agents, how to capture data at the front end to build this end-to-end. And yes, in the future, of course, especially for ops, we want to go for the highest level of automation and personalized customer services and products.
I see. Isowa-san?
Yes. First of all, glad to be back in Singapore FinTech Festival. I sponsored the Japan FinTech Festival this March in Tokyo, and very happy to see how the FinTech community in developing. And I'm SMBC from Japan. AI usage in SMBC started a decade ago, long before the AI hype. We started using machine learning capabilities using IBM Watson in our call centers to support the operators. AI helped them find answers efficiently, and the outcomes were significant. Employee retention and the satisfaction improved a lot, which resulted in cost efficiency as well. Then we used RPAs widely in operations across the organization to improve efficiency. In APAC, we are using OCR and AI to automate the trade finance processing, which has resulted in growing capacity by 3 times. These are a few examples of enterprise-wide all adoption. Although it is difficult to explain the percentage of the total in numbers, but it's hard to find a department that doesn't use AI at all. Back to you.
Wow, I see. So let's dive into AI and how that's being used in day-to-day operations. Now, back in July 2023, I believe SMBC Group became the first among major Japanese banks in developing and rolling out its own AI assistant tool called SMBC GAI. Isowa-san, if you could elaborate how this has helped operations at SMBC and what can other financial services learn from it?
Yes, wow. You did research well. Yes, we developed SMBC GAI, an AI chat application for all employees within SMBC environment using OpenAI Chat GPT model. And employees are using generative AI on a daily basis for getting answers and for translation, etc. In my observation, the biggest learning is that employees are getting the first-hand understanding of where AI is useful, when to use, and when not to. As an organization, it is very important to invest in enterprise-wide understanding and adoption by all employees actually using it every day. Now, we are taking further steps to using generative AI in operations as well.
That's amazing. Well, I believe Anette, Prudential is doing similar to help employee experiences using AI. It's collabed with Google Cloud to build innovative AI-powered products and applications. The new AI Lab, it is the first partnership, I believe, of its kind in the insurance industry in Asia and in Africa, and it'll be launched later this year. Anette, if you could help us address some of the prevalent challenges that the insurance industry is faced with today, and how do you see AI addressing these concerns?
So, first of all, I think the AI lab is very important for us because I think the whole data play and how we implement AI is not just a company play. It's a play of ecosystems from my perspective, how we interact with partners. This was the reason why we built it up with universities, with tech partners, with the government. If I look on insurance, I think one of our biggest challenges right now is to build up a data mindset and a data culture, because AI without a data foundation is like a Ferrari without a road, right? And if you want to bring analytics to scale, this means that we as companies, and you are younger companies, we are 175 years old, we need to build up this data mindset, and we need to enable and upskill and reskill our people to create this understanding. Data is important. Data is key for us. This means breaking down the data silos, building the data repository, seamless access to data, and the right data quality to build up personalized services at the future and to bring more efficiency in operations. But this means we need to help our colleagues on this up and reskilling. And what I mentioned, the data mindset is very important, because how we capture data and how we share data is very important to build AI on top in a significant way.
Right, right. But if AI is being used to, streamline these issues, what does it mean for employees whose jobs may eventually be obsolete because of automation? Will this mean we'll see more layoffs?
No, I don't think so. Because when I look on insurance, and I can only speak for insurance now, is I mentioned it, we still have manual work, and sometimes, and I'm responsible for operations and tech, I feel a little bit sorry for my colleagues because they don't have enough time to spend time with the customers. If we are able to use AI in a scalable and an efficient way, more automated, more efficient processes, this will give our people more time for customers. And the last thing we want to lose is the human touch points with customers. To buy a life policy is not how to buy something to drink or a new car. This is an event for a lot of families and people, and this gives our people, especially in the service area, enough time to interact with customers and to have these human touch points.
I see. Then Isowa-san, what about the banking sector? How are you making sure that AI doesn't cross the line where employees are being, replaced entirely?
I strongly believe that AI is not going to replace humans. Especially in the banking sector. And AI is enabling and supporting to conduct tasks which humans are not doing today due to capacity limitations. AI will help automate the low value added tasks from humans and help humans to handle complex issues. Banking services are siloed today due to organizational limitations. AI can support providing solutions seamlessly in a consumer life cycle. For example, today, within banks, solutioning for a customer could be done by different departments, but AI can enable a consolidation of end-to-end customer view staying within the regulatory rules. Organization silos can be removed by the coexistence of AI and human. I believe that as a result, we will be able to make proposals that tells a story to our customers. However, humans are the ones who actually decide who to propose to.
Right, I
Yeah.
see. So it seems like even if we're using AI, we still need that human touch, especially when it comes to dealing with customers and that customer experience. PayPal is tapping on AI so that customers can have their desired shopping experiences by building intelligence, personalization, and of course the speed into every customer touch point. Sean, maybe you can touch upon this on how can companies then ensure transparency when using AI to interact with customers?
Thank you. Our mission at PayPal is to ensure our shoppers and consumers have an experience that's simple, rewarding, and safe. And when we double click on the safe piece, it's ensuring that transparency where communicating the intent of how the data will be used and ensuring that it's acceptable. Ensuring that we're clarifying when in that engagement, customer interaction lifecycle, are they interacting with a human or interacting with a bot? And when we think about how do we have that trust framework that underpins it, in aligning with the NIST risk management framework for AI, G7 OECD principles for AI. There's a White House Bill of Rights. We're not going to talk about the U.S. election. Goals and guidelines for AI. So to ensure that we can incorporate responsible AI in our framework that's built, that's fair, that's private, that's explainable, secure, and transparent.
I see. Matthew, let's bring you into this conversation then. How can companies balance AI automation with the need for human interaction in customer service?
I think, building on these points here, I think the main thing is making sure you do keep the human in the loop, right? I think what's really important is that if you're thinking about a machine is sort of, they're not thinking, okay? They're working with correlations, and you need to kind of think through how that would make sense. So what's really important, and Sean sort of touched on it, is just having this responsible AI at the center of what you're doing. You've got a full disclosure, but making sure that you have those principles. The human is going to be able to make a call about a contextual situation. They're going to be able to understand bias. They're going to be able to think through novel situations that, if a model's been trained in one particular area, how do they respond in those circumstances? So I think what's very, very important is ensuring that you've got the governance structures in place, so whether or not it's with respect to model governance, but there are kind of two components. One is on the data side, making sure that you've got your data organized in the right way. You've got your permissions, the provenance, the understanding, you're able to disclose in the right way to the customer, and you've got their permission to use that data. And customers are completely okay with you using that information if you've got that value exchange and you're being very transparent about it. And you're recognizing that that data is their data and they've got the right to look at it, understand it, edit it, ask to be removed, etc. So that's point number one. Point number two on top of that is a kind of a model governance or a structure that enables you to think through what are the objectives for doing AI to start with. And so what we tend to run is an internal kind of enterprise risk panel in which anybody who wants to run any kind of AI application has to make a submission to this group. And they will determine, what their objective is, what the model is going to be focused on achieving, what data are they using, what permissions do they have for that data. And it's only once that risk committee is satisfied that they're considering all those factors, they'll then go into beta build, we'll then run the test, we'll see what the outcomes are, and then we'll roll into production. So what you need to do is make sure that you've got that ethical judgment factor. You've got the oversight. And that's what people want. I mean, the easiest analogy to think about it is, look, we all fly here on planes every day. For the most part, the plane technology is completely fine. The plane can take off, the plane can land, don't really need the pilot. I'm not sure that so many people would really get on the plane without the pilot, because it goes, well, what happens if something goes wrong? You want to make sure that you've got a human in the loop. You don't want just ones and zeros making those decisions. And so having that oversight is more important to just provide that nuance, that guidance, and to really provide the contextual intelligence that you're not going to get from a machine today. Yeah.
Well, Matthew, you talked about regulations and oversight. It looks like we have a question from one of our audience here. Is there a risk then that we are pushing out AI capabilities faster than the regulatory oversight? And as they catch up, we could be building beyond compliance appetite? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I think it's very important. We're seeing quite a rapid evolution of the data privacy legislation. And I think that as long as your starting point is responsible AI, right? If you're starting with that point, that's really the basis for everything that you're doing. You're going to be fairly in tune with this. It's a dynamic process because not all the regulations are the same, right? So making sure that you've got that visibility, that understanding, and that you're using that to frame what you're doing. If we think about a lot of the use cases that are being applied today, a lot of them are internal to the company, right? You don't want adversarial chat. You don't want necessarily that direct open loop engagement. What we're trying to do in the first instance is identify the areas where there is internal inconsistency or inefficiency. And it's the AI plus the human working together to solve those internal problems. It's a bit easier on the ROI. And then you're able to control your environment. And as the regulatory frameworks get clarified, and then you're able to ensure that you're satisfying that, and with the right governance in place, you then should be able to work in parallel with and in line with those regulations, because at the end of the day, we're talking about trust with the customer. And that's the critical factor in everything that we're doing.
Nice.
So it's trust first, and you need to have that with these responsibility frameworks. And if you start there, I think that's the safest place, because if you undo that by overstepping, it's very, very hard to earn that back. So you really want to err on the side of trust first, and how do I provide that transparency to the customer?
Well, a lot of attention is being put on data collection methods as well, especially in customer service. Maybe, Sean, you can add on to this. How can financial service companies then better leverage the potential of the data, and what's the role of experimentation of AI?
So when I think about the key use cases, we found success in customer service, which we touched on a little earlier, but also in the fraud space. So during the pandemic, we had significant growth in from 710 or so billion transactions to 1.2 trillion transactions. And with the fraud models and leveraging these AI models, was able to still reduce fraud, cut fraud in half, fraud losses in half. So just showing the tangible wins in the ROI. Similarly, when we think about the productivity with our engineers, how do we ensure that with leveraging generative AI, Copilot, some pieces that we've leveraged internally and developed internally to help accelerate that code production to create product velocity for our engineers. And now, especially as the security officer for the firm, I can ensure that they get rapid feedback if they're having something that's cross-site scripting, SQL injection, vulnerabilities in their code, to get rapid feedback and really help to accelerate the engineering and product velocity so we can push products to market faster that still within that responsible AI framework. And as just in a question of the risk stripes that you anchor on, it's model risk, ensuring you have the model integrity, you have the explainability, the traceability, third-party risk, if you're using any third-party capabilities that you're bringing in, how do you ensure you have that trust chain and assurance? When you think about traditional ML, as was discussed earlier, you have these gradient boost trees where you can start to follow how you got to that decision. It becomes much more complex with AI because you have millions of permutations. So how do you guardrail that clearly? And then, of course, the technology risk components of what you're leveraging more broadly. The last piece I'll add is on the threat side with respect to what we're seeing in the environment. with cyber fraud and crime up to 10.5 trillion. If it were a country, it'd be the third largest country after the US and China. So if we think about that at the scale of what we're seeing, there's a lot of steps and efforts underway to how can we leverage this to protect our models, to protect our customers, protect our merchants more broadly across the ecosystem.
Yeah. Okay, well, since we're on the topic of fraud, fraudsters are seeking new ways to exploit technology, especially when it comes to these scammers attempting to steal millions of payment card numbers through spyware, malware, and other malicious practices. In fact, according to the Coalition Against Insurance Fraud costs the insurance industry more than $308.6 billion per year. Annette, how can the integration of AI into your operations then combat the issue of fraud and scams within the insurance industry?
I would say very simple, it's about prevention, right? Proactive rather than reactive, to deal with huge volume of complex data and do the analytics. So I think for us, this is one of the key areas where we want to leverage AI in the future much more than today. I want to just bring one additional aspect in, because you mentioned the adoption of the technology, the scalability, and experimentation. I think what we actually see is we are moving out of, we have a technology, what can we do with it, into a world where we say, what do we want to improve, and what do we want to solve, and what do we want to sort out? This brings me back to upskill and reskill of our people, to bring our people close to technology, but in combination with their daily business. Fraud is definitely one of them. Claims management is another very important area for us. We are actually focusing accurate risk management, but to bring this kind of new capabilities of technology together with how can we improve, how can we be more proactive, and how can we prevent, I think this is actually the game we are in.
I see. Well, Sean, maybe you can add on then, how can we mitigate the risks of artificial intelligence related scams also being evolved rather with high tech? Perhaps talk to us about some of the AI tools PayPal has in place to combat these issues.
So in addition, just adding to Annette's comments, when we think about the acceleration of the threat, we call it like this fraud and cyber kill chain. It used to take days and weeks before maybe a bug or a hole or a vulnerability was discovered to when we saw it weaponized to when we see active exploitation. With generative AI, we've seen a compression of that attack lifecycle, where as soon as a researcher or some vulnerability is found, they can weaponize that in a matter of minutes, hours, and days. So what that does for us with this compression of this lifecycle, and the increase in the velocity and volume of the attacks, because now you don't have to have deep, sophisticated skills. You can leverage generative AI to weaponize and create these targeted packages that maybe somebody with deep computer science or engineering expertise would have to develop. So in light of the acceleration, the increased volume, how do we defend against that? And some of the efforts we've put in place at PayPal, and I would submit roughly 95% of the incidents we've seen have had some sort of automation. Maybe it's not fully AI, but automation of some sort. And now how do we close off those cases and leveraging generative AI as a defensive mechanism? Can we use it to rapidly detect these vulnerabilities and rapidly address them? Can we leverage what we call generative AI red teaming? We have teams that let's go to try to attack and see how we can abuse the systems that we have so we can find any vulnerabilities and issues before an attacker does or a fraudster. The other key effort is just that continuous updating of the fraud models. We've really looked to compress the time it takes us to update our fraud models, so when we see unique attack patterns and vectors, and these fraudsters follow, it's almost like they have a herd mentality, because most of them, as we scrape the dark web, we see that there's targeted criminal groups. They offer risk as a service, fraud as a service to those who want to purchase it. So it's a herd mentality as they find these vulnerabilities. How can we rapidly update and refresh and tune and enable our models to adapt? And then lastly, it's education. At the end of the day, it's humans, and I think we talked about it about earlier, Isowa-san, and as we looked at, it's the human at the end of the day to educate, ensure if something doesn't look right or something, ensuring that they're aware and continue to educate not only our employees, but our merchants and customers, and just through partnerships globally. If I spend another 30 seconds on partnerships, when I think about World Economic Forum, the Coalition for Secure AI, there are a lot of groups where we all share information amongst ourselves so we can ensure an environment of collective defense.
I see. Well, AI is also being used at Mastercard, right, Matthew? With the speed of how these fraudsters can be tracked down. Are we at the level where we can solely trust AI to track down all fraudulent transactions, or what more needs to be done?
Yeah, look, I think it's going to be an evolving exercise. What we're seeing is we're really it's pretty early days from a generative AI perspective. And as has been discussed earlier, we're always looking at updating our network. We run a vast majority of preventative tools in the way we are looking to protect transactions. So at one level, there's how do we create more safety in the network? And that's just the blocking and tackling every year. And that's tens of billions of dollars every year by continuing to innovate and just deploy those models in there. I think what we're seeing now is that it's going to be a combination of technologies that's going to apply. So if we think about the scams universe, if you like, what is really important is we're seeing a combination of technologies, whether you use the artificial intelligence to sort of adopt the anomaly detection part, you need to kind of combine that with a biometric authentication to make sure that you've got an aspect there on the identity side. You need to think about the device and the device intelligence that you're putting together and then layering it on top of that. One of the other things that's proving critically important is just that network view, right? So making sure that you've got the ability to share and train on a much broader use of network data. So if we use, for example, we run a preventative scam or authorized push payment tool in the UK. Now, what happens with a lot of these scams is that they're creating an urgency for people to act so they don't rationally check, right? And so what we've built is a predictive model based on 13, 15 months of training data where we've got the anomaly detection because you've built the labels. And then what we're able to do is learn the system over time. And so we're able to, based on an assessment of the relationships and nature of the transaction, the time of the transaction, where it's been sent, how it's been sent, the nature of the destination account. We're able to come back and provide a probability of whether we're comfortable with that transaction or not. And then our banking partners can go and actually just validate that with the customer. So being preventative, I think this is a key part of this. And so we're finding that combination is important. And back on the partnerships piece, really, and we talked about this at the Global Anti-Scam Alliance last week in Singapore, it's how do you think through this? Because unfortunately, the bad guys are smart enough not to do it just on a single platform, right? They'll start on a social platform because of distribution. Then they'll point that transaction to a third-party website. Then they'll cultivate that lead, and then they'll try to drive a transaction with another bank. And so there's a passing off of different types of details. So in order for us to really stay ahead, it's to be more collaborative. So how do we work with the regulator? How do we ensure that we have legitimate use provisions in data regulations for each of these individual industries so we can come to the party, if you like, together and say, hey, look, for a legitimate case when I know I'm trying to protect that consumer, it's okay for that maybe the social network to provide me with a signal, to get another signal from the telco via an API, and for me to use that to inform my scam model so I can be more precise, so then I can alert the bank to take the right action to protect the customer before it happens. So that's where the evolution is going to go. So it's going to be an ever-evolving battle. But the key thing is that how do we work together against a common enemy, if you like, but we're going to have to evolve our tactics over time, because if we've got an 8-foot wall, they're going to very quickly build a 9-foot ladder. So it's an evolving collaborative process, but together we're confident that we're seeing results. And in the UK, for the first time, we saw a 12% reduction in APP fraud scam fraud in the UK, which is the first time we've seen a reduction really since we've been tracking it. So it shows that with the right solutions, the right collaboration, you can get good results, but you can't take it for granted.
Well, another risk I want to highlight when it comes to generative AI is that sometimes it comes up with factually inaccurate answers. In financial services institutions where accurate and reliable data is crucial, poorly reported data can lead to inaccurate or unreliable outputs, resulting in significant miscommunication or falsified results. Isowa-san, maybe you can add into this, keeping in mind the possibility of inaccuracies. How is generative AI carefully being used in the financial services, especially when it comes down to handling real money and financial livelihoods of customers?
Yes, and I'm not too worried about the accuracy in calculations. That can be handled properly in design. But in customer experience, the most important factors are relevance and nuance in the responses. And alignment of organizational values and culture with the responses needs to be carefully designed. In SMBC, we are conducting joint experiments with customers to fine-tune the models. It's a continuous journey. We need to have the courage to let it out in a controlled manner.
I see. Well, we have another question from one of our audience here. Since we talked about the risk, maybe Anette, you can tell us what are the safest use cases to be used within financial services?
The safest?
Yes.
I would say what I have mentioned already. It's about the fraud management. I think that's a key topic. Claims, I have mentioned already. Very, very important. We haven't talked about healthcare insurance. Key topic for us if it comes to how to provide the right services, especially at the right time with the right response time. So AI is helping a lot on that as well. And then what I mentioned, the accurate risk management. Yeah. So this is what we have on the radar. These are our key topics.
I see.
I'll add to the safest use cases, and especially a couple years ago with the advent of GPT-3 and 3.5, it was like, where's the test and learn? You can do that. That's going to be low risk to manage this accordingly. Some of the key ones we tried was we work toward is like scanning contracts. So how do you ensure, are we meeting our contractual obligations or ensuring our third parties are meeting them, and just digesting them and run through and model them out. Ensuring that, do we have, when we think about regulatory policies, scanning, can we scan all of the regulations globally, and then we can translate that and dump our policies into it. And then is there something from a regulatory requirement that may not be clearly articulated in one of our policies, so we can look to address it. But using our own internal data, and the same with our internal chatbots, where let the teams load all of our policies, like some of the low-hanging fruits, load all our security policies and standards in the company, and then people can query that internally to understand and save time of putting in a ticket or reaching out to someone on the team. So those were like very, if something was a little off or wrong as far as like with the internal pieces, you can learn and calibrate and iterate in a low-risk environment. Yeah.
If I just may add on that, one thing is what is the safest. On the other side, what we are discussing a lot, the value, right? To come up with cases where we really see, from an internal perspective, but also on the customer side, the real value, right? Sometimes you have the bucket of the safest, the buckets of the easiest, and I'm always looking on the bucket value. Value from an internal perspective, but also value from a customer point of view, because you can spend so much time, so much effort. There are so many options and good opportunities we can go for, but it's also about prioritization and focus. right? And of course, I fully agree with the question, what are the safest use case? But I think beside that, we should not forget the value-driven approach, because otherwise we are not really moving out of the experimentation. So I fully agree with what you mentioned. We have a lot of these cases, especially in operations and in services, but to bring it more on this value-driven approach that we can create measurable results out of it, because it's also important for our people. Yeah, they spend a lot of time of effort on it.
I mean, I'd agree with that. I mean, we've talked about documents, we've talked about software, we've talked about operational processes, we've talked about everything that's got that manual component that you can cut through some automation, right? And I think that those are areas where naturally we get into risk management. Obviously, from an anomaly detection, those are very proven use cases, and you're using your own internal data, right? To your point, you're not risking it in the wild, if you like. But where we're going to go next, I think, is going to be related to both the points made. It's in this hyper-personalization. Today, you can contextualize that, but what we're finding is that, again, with the right degree of responsible data in the engagement with the client under a value exchange piece, provided you're putting their interests and you're describing what that is, and you can then leverage zero and first party data to create value on a permission basis. So I think that's where the next step is going to be, is once we've, and look, these internal use cases are great because they help drive the capability in the firm, because that's so important. Once you have those building blocks, the data, the governance, the processes, the talent, the controls, the experiences, and you've got the confidence that you can execute, then the next step is going to be a huge amount of personalization value, right? Because all of a sudden, as an institution or a network, if you're able to demonstrate that value exchange to the customer, that's going to be much more relevant. You're serving a policy at the right time, you're intercepting a transaction at the right time to check on the person. That's where the value is going to come. So I think that there's a reason for that, but yeah, hyper-personalization is ultimately where we're going to go.
I see. We have about 40 seconds on the clock. So to wrap this conversation up, maybe I can get one line from all of you. What does the future of financial services look like with AI fully integrated into the financial industry? Sean?
Exciting, hyper-personalized, and safe.
Yeah.
Matthew?
I'd say safer, smarter, more personal.
Annette?
Personalized, automated, and much more efficient than today.
So
Yes, my vision is in a future where AI is fully integrated. Every human will have own AI agent or AI-enabled avatars to conduct tasks on behalf of them. Banking will become hyper-personalized and invisible at the same time.
That's amazing. Well, thank you all for joining me on this panel discussion, taking a look at AI in action, the real world use cases for financial services of tomorrow. Thank you, everyone. Give us a round of applause for our panelists.